So believe it or not, this was planted probably about 5 years ago. It was a seedling maybe slightly half the size, and it has spent the last 5 or so years effectively putting down its roots and getting growing. It was only in the last year or two, like last year it grew just slightly less than half of its original size. You can tell by the much greener growth on the top part here, whereas down here you can see that this is starting to get more woody and develop that kind of more brown barky kind of look to it. This is Garcinia livingstoniana. This is actually an indigenous fruit tree. The fruits can be quite nice, they can also be quite astringent. I don't know which this is going to be at the moment, but regardless of whether I'm going to eat it or not, it will be food for the other wildlife in the area, and I really look forward to seeing this grow and develop. It is an evergreen. It will never lose the leaves, or it won't lose any of the newer growth for several years. Even in the heat of the summertime, as we're cutting into, it'll maintain these leaves, and we will still water this on a weekly basis. Probably this year, maybe next year, just to make sure that it is really well established, and then I'll leave it to its own devices. This here is quite hard to see. We've got some of the weeds that have grown up around it in this past rainy season. But this just looks like a little tiny twig. This was planted last year. It did grow, maybe about 1.5 inches or so. It is still alive. You can always test by just gently trying to bend the stalk. If it is springy, then it's still alive. If not, it will easily snap. You can feel it too, essentially. This is an Intandophragma species. This one will get to a large tree. These are generally referred to as the wooden banana because they produce a seed pod that is quite elongated. It doesn't exactly look like a banana, but common names don't always match in some cases. This will get to a fairly big tree. This, when it is fully grown, will be as tall as everything else here in the woodland area, and I really am looking forward to seeing this one grow and get bigger because this is a beautiful tree when it is sized up. This tree I planted quite a number of years ago now. I can't actually even remember it's been that long. This is a young Gyrocarpus americanus, subspecies africanus. This is the only tree in its genus in Zambia. It's in the family the only tree in its family in Zambia, in the family Hernandiaceae. This is one of my favorite trees at the moment in terms of growing with this kind of beautiful, almost like elephant skin bark. It has beautiful lobed leaves when it is in leaf, although this time of year it is leafless. This is now big enough we do not give this any extra water in the dry season. Now it is fully dependent on the rains, and I really look forward to this becoming a nice big tree in the canopy that will cast its shade and provide that interest with this trunk. So as you can see here, we had a tree that came down, and this tree came down a number of years ago. It was one of the biggest in the woodland area, but it got struck by lightning one year, and within about 2 years it had died, and about 2 or 3 years later it had started falling down, and not last year, the year before, it pretty much collapsed altogether. Now, I've left it in place. It is food for the termites, it is food for all other insects, it is hiding spots for wildlife, but I'm not just going to leave an open space. So I have planted other things around it. Just here in front of me is a seedling of what they call the ghost tree. This is Sterculia quincoloba. It produces massive leaves, but then one of the main interesting things of it, it produces this kind of white peeling bark, as we have here. Even as I touch it, actually, you can see the bloom coming off of it, which covers my fingers and stuff like that. This tree, when it is full grown, this bark at this time of year in the dry season really shines. You can see it from quite a ways off, and I really look forward for this tree to be big enough one day that anywhere I walk around the plot I can see this brightly lit against the background at this time of year when everything else is dry, and it shines at that time of year. But this one is just one of what I've planted around the base. Then we've got here. Then not very far, I've also got this little plant here. This is in the bean family, the Fabaceae. It doesn't look like much now. I hope that it has survived. It's still got the spring to it. It's not going to snap when I do this. This is Xeroderus. This has beautiful white flowers. So this one has been planted more for its ornamentation, but when it is mature and the flowers are produced, this will be a favorite of bees and things like that that will enjoy the pollen and the nectar from these flowers. So even though this big tree fell, it has opened up an opportunity to plant a number more things around it so that eventually the canopy will be replaced and we'll get back to being a nice kind of closed canopy woodland in this area.